Chapter 7 is all about sampling distributions, and we begin the section of statistics where we talk about inference, where we take what we know from a sample and then we apply it to estimate something about the population. Many times in real life scenarios, populations are really difficult to find out information about because they're often so large it's very time consuming and very expensive to collect information from an entire population. For example, if you wanted to know something about every high school student in the United States, you would have to, 1, find them all, 2, contact them all, and 3, hope that they all are willing to answer your question. So instead, we do sampling, and then we use our information from the sampling to estimate things about the population. So to begin, we need some vocabulary. The first piece of vocabulary that we need is a parameter. What a parameter is it is a number that describes a characteristic about a population or of a population. We've been using these all year long, and we just haven't actually called them parameters. For example, this represents the population mean, and it's a parameter. The Greek letter sigma represents the population standard deviation. It's a parameter. Usually, but not always, they are Greek letters. The one exception to that we will use is the Roman letter P, which stands for proportion of a population. Okay, a statistic is very similar, but instead of describing the characteristic of a population, a statistic describes a characteristic of a sample. Okay, we've also been using these all year. For example, just like mu here means the population mean, x bar is the sample mean. S is the sample standard deviation, and the complement here of P is P hat. That is the sample proportion. Okay, these are related to one another because we use statistics to estimate parameters. Always remember the people who developed these vocabulary words were very nice to you because they tried to make it easy for you to remember which one's which. Parameter, population, P and P, statistic, sample, S and S. So don't confuse them. And an AP test tip, as well as a tip from my test, is to make sure that you always specify from now on that you're talking about either the population mean or the sample mean, or the population proportion and the sample proportion, etc. You can use the symbols to differentiate between the two, but you can no longer just say the mean of a distribution is, 45. You need to specifically say the mean of the population or the mean of the sample. Otherwise, no one knows what you're talking about. So let's look at these two examples right here. One, we need to identify the population, parameter, sample, and statistic. So if we look at this problem here, this pediatrician wants to know the 75th percentile for the distribution of heights of 10-year-old boys. So she takes a sample of 50 patients and calculates the third quartile to be 56 inches. So our population is the group of people that she's interested in knowing something about. So that would be all 10-year-old boys. It does not specify that they're in the U.S. or in a state. So we're assuming that she's interested in all 10-year-old boys. Okay, the parameter that she's looking for it says is the 75th percentile for their heights. So another way to put that is that she's looking for the third quartile of the population. For the sample, okay, it said that's the people she's actually getting information from. This tells us that her sample is her 50 patients. So that's the sample. And then the statistic is the information she actually gets from the sample. So that would be that the third quartile of the sample is equal to 56 inches. Okay, always include your units because statistics is more than numbers, it's numbers with a story. Okay, for example 2, this research center asked 1,102 12 to 17-year-olds in the United States if they have a cell phone. Of the respondents, 71% said yes. So again, our population is who we're interested in, and in this case, it is 12 to 17-year-olds. In the U.S. The parameter is what we're interested in knowing. Basically, they're asking them if they have a cell phone or not, and then here it gives us a clue because it said 71% said yes. Well, we don't have a way to represent percents, but proportions are the same thing. So we're looking for the proportion. And if we say that's P, that tells us it's a population proportion because this is the symbol for population of 12 to 17-year-olds who have a cell phone. The sample are the people we actually can gather information from, and in this case that's the 1,102 12 to 17-year-olds that were surveyed. And then we have the statistic, which is what we actually found out from the sample. And in this case, it's at 71% said yes. So we know that the proportion of the sample, which is p hat, is equal to 0.71.